Welcome, dear XTERA community, to our XTERA event today. How are you all doing? I hope you are just as excited and motivated as I am. What an incredible development we have experienced together over the past weeks and months. And at this point, a huge congratulations to each and every one of you. You are the reason why XTERA continues to grow, becomes more visible, and step by step establishes itself as a strong brand in the world. And let's make one thing absolutely clear. What we are building together here is not a short-term hype. It is something sustainable, something real. Because XTERA stands for something that is absolutely unique in our industry and represents a special USP. 4 years of proven results in trading, 4 years of performance, 4 years of real trades, 4 years of consistency. That is a massive USP, not only in the field of trading, but especially in our industry of network marketing and community building. And that's exactly what shows. This is about long-term vision, about trust, and about real expertise. Our traders are not theorists. They deliver real results, and that is exactly the foundation for everything we are building together here. And now it's your turn. Let's bring the chat to life today. Write in the chat, where are you from? Give us a thumbs up if you're ready. Show that you're actively involved and part of this movement. Because it's exactly this energy, exactly this community that makes XTERA so special. And there's another special highlight waiting for you as well. Our president will round off this call with his closing words. So look forward to hearing from Stephen Paul as well. And now I am especially pleased to introduce someone you all know and appreciate. Someone who always impresses with his strong input, who delivers real added value and truly helps you move forward. A warm welcome to Dominic. The stage is yours.
Thank you, Daniel, for this handover. Always so energizing. Hello, everyone. Once again, it is with great pleasure that I join you for this 5th meeting. This session will mark a turning point in our journey. Up until now, we have built the foundations. We have installed the engines of your strategy. Well, today, we are going to learn together how to pilot this plane at high altitude. Now, we're no longer in the garage. We're right there on the runway, and it's time to hit the throttle. So first of all, of course, I want to once again thank the XTERA team who are giving us the opportunity to break down their value proposition so that these trainings become more and more concrete and beneficial for you. In fact, by choosing to allow each of us to delegate the management of our portfolio in a way that's as diversified as what you see on your dashboard, meaning a mix of digital assets, precious metals, and international indices. XTERA has chosen an approach that enables users to focus on what matters most, their strategy and their judgment. If you look at your dashboard today, you see names like BTC, ETF, XAO, NASDAQ, SPX. So for someone who's not familiar, that's a rather intimidating list. But for you, who have chosen to take charge of your finances, these are navigation instruments that will shape your future. And the goal of this session is to give you control over your trajectory. We don't want you to be passive passengers who tremble at the slightest jolt in the market. We want you to be that pilot who, when flying through turbulence, calmly checks their instruments because they understand the dynamics of the flight. Daniel reminded us of this forcefully. Your ultimate mission is to build your financial peace of mind on solid foundations. A capital that works for you and will be there for you, your children, and the generations to come. To achieve this, today we will go through 4 fundamental steps together that will transform your perspective. First, the first key, we will understand why your portfolio needs both an anchor and a sail. We will decipher the vital balance between gold and Bitcoin so that you finally understand why. Stability does not oppose performance. Second key, we will learn how to read the pulse of the planet. We will see how the NASDAQ, the S&P 500, and currency markets like Forex tell you about the world's health in real time. The goal is simple. No longer be subjected to the news, but know how to interpret it. Third key, we will address a formidable psychological phenomenon, the vertigo of altitude. This is the precise moment when your gains reach a new scale and your emotions can become your worst enemies. We will see how to keep a cool head when the numbers soar. And then the fourth key, we will see how to transform your current cockpit into a true fortress. And yes, Daniel insisted on this responsibility. We must learn to secure our assets so that today's success becomes an indestructible legacy for tomorrow. You don't build a legacy on luck or chance. You build it on a clear-headed understanding of cash flows and total responsibility toward those who depend on us. So today we're leaving the jargon behind to truly take control of our finances. Welcome to session 5. Now let's get to the heart of the matter with what I call the sovereign duo. If you look at your financial dashboard, you have two assets that seem to be opposed, but in reality, they work together in synergy to protect your future. Gold, XTERA, and Bitcoin, BTC. In the traditional financial world, people love to create camps, each defending their own point of view. You have the defenders of gold, often seen as cautious traditionalists, and the crypto enthusiasts, seen as digital adventurers. But for the CEO of their own finances, this division is a trap. The CEO isn't trying to prove one camp right over the other. They aim to use the unique qualities of each asset to stabilize their position. If you want to build something lasting, you need to understand how to secure your assets beyond passing trends. So let's start by talking about gold, your anchor, with the weight of 5,000 years of history. Why maintain exposure to gold in an increasingly digital world? Well, because gold is the only currency in the world that is no one's debt. When you hold a banknote, what you actually have is a promise made to you by a central bank. Whereas when you hold gold, you actually possess a physical, tangible reality that has withstood wars, crises, and the fall of empires. I like to use this image. Imagine gold as ballast that stabilizes a large sailboat. The ballast is heavy, it's at the bottom of the hold, you don't see it, and it doesn't make the boat go any faster. But it's what keeps the boat from capsizing when a storm hits. Gold won't make you rich overnight. Its role isn't explosive performance, it's the preservation of purchasing power. Let me share with you this anecdote, which is well known but worth repeating because the concept is interesting. A century ago, with 1 ounce of gold, you could buy yourself a luxury suit in London. Today, in 2026, with that same ounce of gold, you can still buy yourself the same luxury suit. But in the meantime, paper money has lost 98% of its value. Gold is your shield against inflation and devaluation. Let me illustrate this with a figure. If you had put 10,000 euros under your mattress in the year 2000, they would have lost 45% of their real purchasing power today. Whereas if you had invested those 10,000 euros in gold, you would have multiplied your purchasing power by 7. That's the difference between saving and steering. Gold is, in a way, a heritage life insurance policy, the foundation for securing your assets. At the other end of your dashboard, you have Bitcoin. If gold is your anchor, then Bitcoin is your sail. It's digital gold. It has the same scarcity properties. There will never be more than 21 million of them. But it has a characteristic that gold does not: velocity and total portability. You hold your wealth on a USB stick. Bitcoin catches the winds of the world's digitalization. It's the asset that records the growth in adoption of a new financial system. So why is it essential in your strategy? Well, because in a world that's moving faster and faster, a single anchor is not enough. You need propulsion. Bitcoin is here to transform stagnant savings into dynamic capital. So a lot of people today are afraid of Bitcoin's volatility. That is, the big fluctuations, the ups and downs. But in reality, it's precisely this volatility that will generate performance. In financial mathematics, this is called asymmetry. The risk of loss is limited to 100%, of course, but the potential for gain is mathematically unlimited. That's why a small dose of Bitcoin in a diversified portfolio will boost the whole thing, without putting the structure at risk. And this is where, of course, your discernment comes into play. The individual sees Bitcoin drop by 15 points and panics. He feels like a victim of the market. Whereas the CEO of his finances will watch the sail flutter and smile, because he knows that this same tension in the sail will propel his ship a little further, at a speed that gold could never reach. So what's important is to understand how these flows work, even if you start with small amounts just to get familiar with it. Since we're here, I'd like to share a little management tip with you. Don't fall into the trap of checking the price of Bitcoin every morning. The price is what you pay. The value is what you own. The value of Bitcoin lies in the network, the blockchain, the security, the immutability. The value of gold, on the other hand, lies in its physical scarcity. In fact, you need to think of your wealth like a house. Gold is like the reinforced concrete foundation. It doesn't move. It's not exciting to look at, but without it, the house could collapse at the first earthquake. Bitcoin, on the other hand, is like the electrical wiring, the fiber optics. That's what brings light, energy, and connection to the world. A house without a foundation is dangerous. But a house without electricity is outdated, off the market. One of the goals of this session is to help you understand the importance of synergy. Why not choose both when building your portfolio? Well, because a boat with a sail but no anchor ends up crashing on the rocks at the first storm. And a boat with an anchor but no sail never leaves the harbor and ends up rusting in place. By combining both forces in a management approach that is delegated, you create what is called financial sovereignty. You gain independence. When the global economy is stable and tech-driven, your Bitcoin Ethereum sale propels you to new heights of performance. When geopolitics flare up, as we see all too often and even recently, or when trust in central banks erodes, this time it's gold, your anchor, that will stabilize your wealth. Keep in mind that during the major crises of the past 20 years, gold has almost always performed in the opposite direction of the market. This is what we call decorrelation. It's the holy grail for investors. And I often emphasize the importance of understanding how your money should flow, what we call money flow. If your money is being used wisely to work for you, then it should move between safety and growth. As someone using this strategy, your role is to accept this mechanism in order to get ahead. To conclude this first key point, I want to emphasize our responsibility toward our loved ones. Passing on an inheritance isn't just about handing over a sum of money, it's about passing on a balanced financial management tool. Imagine giving your children a GPS set to the destination, financial independence. That's when you teach them that wealth doesn't come from a stroke of luck with some obscure crypto. It comes from a structure that's able to withstand crises and take advantage of technological revolutions. Your golden rule, no pun intended, is to stop wondering whether Bitcoin is better than gold precisely. Instead, ask yourself if your cockpit, your financial management tool, is able to take advantage of both. In a word, aim for balance. If you feel stressed, it means your anchor is too light. If you find that your capital is stagnating, it means your sail is still folded up in its bag. That's what allows you to stop being a victim of uncertainty and become the pilot of your own destiny. Your goal is to no longer be subject to the price of the euro or the dollar, to own assets that have their own operating rules and to coordinate them to take advantage of synergies. Thanks to this first step, you'll be able to sleep soundly at night, knowing that your legacy is being built, stone by stone, stream by stream. All right, now we're going to move on to key number 2, knowing how to take the pulse of the planet. In other words, now that we've dropped anchor and raised our sail, we need to learn how to read the weather. If you want to fly at high altitude, you can't just rely on the power of your engine. You need to understand the air currents and climate variations. This is where the indices come into play. Nasdaq, which represents technology stocks. SPX, better known as the S&P 500 for the 500 largest market capitalizations in the United States. And Forex, the currency market, with in particular the GBP EUR quote, to compare the evolution of the pound sterling against the euro. The Nasdaq and the S&P 500, these are your engines of the real economy. So let's start with them. Why include them in your cockpit? Well, quite simply because if Bitcoin is the sail of the future, then these indices are the engines of the present. The S&P 500 SPX is the aristocracy of the global economy. Just imagine the 500 largest American companies. These are the ones that make the phones you carry in your pocket, the medicines that treat you. They're the ones that manage the servers through which your data passes. When you delegate your management to these indices, you're not making a bet on some miracle stock. You're investing in the resilience of the global economic system. That's your cruising speed. The Nasdaq, on the other hand, is your turbo engine. It's the sanctuary of innovation. Behind the Nasdaq, you find artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and the energy transition. In other words, if the S&P 500 is the heart of the economy, you could say the Nasdaq is its brain. Why is it such an incredible tool for discernment? Well, because it shows where the smart money is going. When the Nasdaq rises, it means the world is betting on progress. When it loses steam, it's often a sign that investors are seeking safety in gold or traditional savings. And here's a tip if you want to know what kind of people you're dealing with. When you talk about finance with people around you, keep in mind that most of the time, the amateur is the one who will jump on a single trendy stock, like Nvidia or Tesla, hoping to hit the jackpot, a bit like someone hoping to win the lottery. Whereas the insider, the one who knows how to manage their finances, will instead bet on a global index. Why? Because an index never falls to zero. If a company included in the index collapses, it will automatically be replaced by another, more successful company. This is the perfect illustration of asset protection. Using collective strength to protect your capital through what is called pooling or diversification. It's the story of not putting all your eggs in one basket. So now let's move on to a more subtle instrument, Forex, which is the currency market. And in particular, the pair we've chosen between the British pound and the euro. Why focus specifically on the British pound against the euro? Well, because currencies are the thermometer of a nation's health. Forex is the largest and most liquid market in the world. This is where a certain form of truth is expressed, unfiltered. If the British pound rises against the euro, it tells us something. A story, one of increased confidence in the British economy or of doubt about the eurozone. As the CEO of your finances, you need to accept a harsh reality. Your money has no homeland, it only has destinations. If you leave 100% of your assets in a single currency, for example, the euro, and that currency weakens, you lose purchasing power without even having made a single bad investment. This is what we call the invisible outflow, in a way. Understanding Forex means understanding the monetary flow I mentioned earlier. Money behaves like a fluid. It moves to where it is best treated, where growth is real, and where interest rates are attractive. By delegating this management, you ensure that your money travels to areas of strength rather than stagnating in areas of weakness. So now that we have a clearer understanding of all these nuances, imagine that these assets are the sensors of your station. Financial weather, the Nasdaq. It tells you about the strength of the sun, which represents innovation and optimism. The S&P 500 gives you the atmospheric pressure, which is the overall economic health. The Forex, especially for Europe, the pound-sterling-euro pair, shows you the direction and strength of the currents by tracking capital flows. Most of the time, individuals are subject to the weather. When it rains, they complain. Whereas someone who has taken control of their finances will analyze the indicators and adjust their flight plan. If the pressure drops, S&P 500, or if the wind shifts, Forex, he knows that his delegated management system will naturally rebalance, perhaps toward gold or other assets, safe havens. If I could offer a piece of common sense advice, I would tell you to stop letting geopolitical news make you anxious. Read it with curiosity. A major election in England, watch the Forex. A technological breakthrough, watch the Nasdaq. You are no longer a victim of the news. You are now able to analyze it. Your responsibility begins with understanding the world. You can't protect your family by remaining ignorant. You protect them by understanding where the flow is going. And maybe one last crucial point for this key. In financial management, bad economic news, like a rise in unemployment, can sometimes make the markets go up. Why? Because it can prompt central banks to lower interest rates, which gives these companies a breath of fresh air. And this is where the discernment of the general manager of your finances will surpass the emotional reactions of an amateur. By understanding these mechanisms, you stop reacting in a knee-jerk way. Now you understand the importance of having delegated a financial management system designed precisely to navigate all these paradoxes. You learn to trust the instruments rather than your fears. So, in conclusion to this second key point, we could say that by mastering the pulse of the planet, you are, in a way, validating your ticket to independence. You understand that wealth is not a block of stone. Immobile, it's a living organism that breathes in time with global events. And it's this understanding that will allow you, in the next step, to manage what we call the vertigo of altitude. So we now come to our third key point. Here, this is a crucial stage in our journey. We've already learned to handle the instruments, we've learned to read the weather, but there's still one factor that no one can delegate. Not even the best artificial intelligence can take on that role. It's our own psychology. In this third key point, we're going to address the phenomenon I call the vertigo of altitude. It's that precise moment when your strategy starts to pay off. The numbers on your dashboard shift to a whole new scale. And your emotions can suddenly become your worst enemies. The vertigo of altitude is what happens when your capital is no longer just a mathematical abstraction and starts to represent a concrete economic reality. And yes, because at the beginning, a 1% change in your portfolio might just be the price of a nice dinner out. It's almost trivial in a way. But when your capital grows, that same 1% can suddenly represent a month's rent. Or worse, the price of a car, for example. That's when you need to be prepared so you don't fall into your own trap. In fact, as long as the amounts are small, everyone is able to manage their decisions like a good CEO. But as soon as the zeros start to add up, the reptilian brain takes over again. You no longer look at the strategy, you look at what you're gaining or losing compared to your usual salary. To use an analogy, so you really understand where I'm going with this, imagine an airline pilot who, instead of looking at the navigation instruments to stay on course, spends his time looking out the window thinking, oh wow, we're at 10,000 meters. If we fall, it's over. That pilot would end up making a fatal mistake. The good pilot, on the other hand, stays focused on his instruments, no matter the altitude. For you, the altitude is the size of your capital, as you've understood. And your cockpit is the dashboard, through which you have both set the course and delegated operations, precisely so you can detach yourself from that raw emotion. Why can we fall victim to this vertigo? Well, quite simply because of a cognitive bias called anchoring. We are all anchored to our current level of income. To illustrate the situation from a radical point of view, let's say that if someone earns 3,000 euros per month, their brain will have trouble accepting seeing their capital fluctuate by 5,000 euros in a single day of trading. And this is where the discernment of the general manager must come into play. You need to learn to decouple your time value, your salary, and your capital value. Your capital is not your salary. It is a living organism that needs to breathe. If you try to stop it from breathing, for example, by cutting your positions too early out of fear, or in this case, by not sticking to your strategy for a sufficient period of time, you simply run the risk of suffocating it. In a previous session, we went into detail on this point, emphasizing the importance of letting money circulate, not treating capital as a frozen trophy that you're afraid to touch, but rather making it a dynamic resource. Vertigo often leads to two opposite behaviors, both of which are equally dangerous. First, euphoria, the intoxication of reaching new heights. Everything is going up and you feel invincible. You start wanting to help the algorithm to add more risk because it seems like things can only go up. But this is the moment when you forget your anchor, your gold, and only see the sail. Or on the other hand, panic, a leap into the void. At the slightest 5% correction on the Nasdaq or Bitcoin, you forget that you are building a legacy over 10 to 20 years. You just want to salvage what you can. You sell at the lowest point, turning a virtual loss into a real and permanent one. To help you really understand what sets winners apart from losers in the markets, all you have to do is look at the statistics. And especially this amusing anecdote that shows that the best performing portfolios over 20 years often belong to people who forgot their access code. Why? Because they couldn't act on impulse. By delegating your management, you've already done 80% of the work to avoid this trap. But the remaining 20% is your ability not to touch the controls when the plane goes through turbulence. To overcome this dizziness, I have a mental trick to suggest. It's called the facial indicator exercise. It's going to be fun. Look, it works a bit like when you want to unlock your iPhone with your face. You just have to look at your numbers. If you smile when things go up, and you make a bit of a face because you feel a knot in your stomach when things go down, then you're not quite ready yet to be considered the CEO in control of your finances. You are a passenger who hopes and endures situations. The CEO, on the other hand, must aim for neutrality. Their satisfaction doesn't come from today's numbers. It comes from the fact that their strategy is being followed. And if I had to put it another way, as a tip, I would say that in finance, success is often boring. And that's exactly how it should be. If you're looking for adrenaline, go to the casino. If you're looking to build wealth for your children, accept the boredom of a strategy that works for you while you sleep. I actually think that we will all agree that the goal in the end is to secure the future through a strategy and specialized partnerships. In this respect, security, it's true that it's rarely exciting, but it's also what helps you sleep better at night. And to finish on this key point, I want to emphasize something important that is close to my heart, the sense of responsibility towards your loved ones. The more your capital grows, the greater your responsibility becomes. That dizzy feeling is also the fear of disappointing those who matter to you. But remember, you won't protect your family by watching the charts 24 hours a day. You will protect them by sticking to the flight plans you have drawn up with the help of specialists and through regular checkpoints, which you will need to set up. True responsibility, therefore, means leaving nothing to chance, identifying the areas where you need to strengthen your personal knowledge, and selecting the right tools, partners, and strategies, so that you can make personal decisions and improve your judgment and ability to make those decisions as you gain experience. Being responsible means being aware of your strengths and weaknesses so you can grow step by step, and always choosing a method suited to your situation, just as you would choose a suit that fits your size. There will always be time to move up to a different category as time goes on. Building a legacy means accepting that the path is not a straight line. It means understanding that every market downturn is a necessary pause to climb higher. It's a bit like gaining momentum on the way down so you can reach greater heights the next time. If you feel that sense of vertigo and learn to manage it calmly, that's a good sign. It means you're moving into a new financial dimension. It's a growing pain, a bit like muscle soreness when you start working out. To conclude this stage, I'd like you to remember that your instruments, Nasdaq, Bitcoin, gold, are doing their job. Partners like XTERA, whom you have selected, are also doing their job. And your job is to define and channel. How are you going to manage the human being you see reflected on your computer screen? In other words, yourself. Don't let your emotions sabotage your career as a pilot. Prepare yourself to look at big numbers with the same detachment as small numbers. It's this strength of character that separates those who make a quick buck from those who build an empire. So, now that we are psychologically stabilized, we can move on to the final step. How to turn this cockpit into a true fortress to sustain this success. Here we are. You now master your instruments and know how to read the global weather. You have learned to tame that famous feeling of vertigo at high altitude. But a CEO doesn't just keep his plane in the air. He must make sure that the wealth being transported arrives safely at its destination, and above all, that it stays there for decades to come. In this fourth key, this final key, we will see how to transform your current cockpit into a true fortress for your assets. Because it cannot be said enough. Building a legacy is above all about knowing how to secure your assets for the long term. The platforms we use are there to support a strategy sustainably. The first secret of an indestructible fortress is understanding that your capital should not be a frozen lake. It should actually be a dynamic river. In our previous sessions, we already talked about this principle of communicating vessels. In reality, to build a fortress, you need to use the profits generated by your performance engine, for example, delegated trading on Bitcoin, the Nasdaq, or gold, to irrigate other areas of your life. To use an analogy from the agricultural sector, just imagine that your trading account, for example, is an ultra-efficient dam. If you keep all the water in the dam, either it ends up stagnating or the pressure becomes too great and you risk an emotional breakdown. In other words, the vertigo we just talked about. The CEO who controls and takes responsibility for his strategy will use this water to irrigate all of his land. This is a crucial reflex. For example, you can apply the rule of performance withdrawals. Once per quarter, or as soon as a goal is reached, withdraw a portion of your profits to inject them into the real economy. Whether it's, for example, to pay off a debt, invest in real estate, or simply to protect your family with more traditional capitalization contracts. It's a good way to recycle your gains by securing them in more generic assets. In other words, it's a way to use today's technological leverage to build tomorrow's foundations. Sometimes you shouldn't hesitate to go back to common sense rules. In aeronautics, for example, you never set off with just one hydraulic system. That's called redundancy. If the main system fails, system B takes over. It's the same in your wealth management system. Redundancy is your ability not to depend on a single point of failure. And sometimes that's counterintuitive. For example, we often think that diversification means having lots of different assets. Well, actually, that's true. But real security is having assets that aren't stored in the same place or subject to the same laws. Discernment means realizing that, thanks to the performance of digital assets, I can open the doors to redundancy for my physical assets. Concretely, this means owning a bit of physical gold at home, having accounts in several institutions, or even holding rental real estate. Someone who has 100% of their wealth in a single asset, even the most brilliant one, is not the CEO of their finances. They remain a gambler who, up until now, has just been lucky. The CEO, on the other hand, will spread out their resources to become invincible. So since the beginning of this session, I've often talked about our loved ones, about our responsibility towards them, about our legacy in a way. But be careful, there's a serious trap. Giving a large sum of money to an heir who hasn't received any financial education is a bit like handing over the controls of a Boeing 747 to someone who's never even flown a drone. In fact, statistically, it's the shortest path to a crash. Your real fortress isn't the amount you leave in a will. It's the culture of stewardship that you pass on during your lifetime. Have you ever wondered why some families stay wealthy for 5 or 6 generations, while others lose everything by the second? It's not actually because they have more money. It's because they pass down a family culture, management rules, an understanding of cash flow, and a respect for risk. Why not? Why not avoid making your approach so sacred that it becomes a family project? Don't hide your screens from your children. Show them your dashboard. Explain it to them in simple words. Why does dad or mom have an anchor in gold, a sail in Bitcoin? Teach them that money is a tool for freedom, not a tool for consumption. By doing this, you are installing a true decision-making software in them, a real operating system for their own life. That is what legacy is. The ultimate legacy. Education, by example. The kind that can neither be taxed nor stolen. So, to sum up this key point, let's say that to make your success last, you need to move out of the emotional dimension and into the accounting dimension. The CEO of these finances conducts audits. I suggest you carry out your own financial independence audit every 2 or 3 months. Ask yourself these 3 fundamental questions. Is my structure resilient? In other words, if my main tool is unavailable tomorrow morning, can my family manage for 6 to 9 months? That is the 0 level of your fortress. Essential. Second question, have I turned the virtual into reality? Are my profits ready to leave the screen to fuel other assets under construction? Is everything circulating and being recycled smoothly to stabilize and increase my assets? If the answer is no, you're just racking up video game scores. You're not actually developing your finances. Third question, has my level of discernment increased? Do I understand the financial options available to me better than I did 2 months ago? Do I feel truly comfortable and confident with the selection of experts, delegation, and establishing regular checkpoints with my financial partners? This way of asking yourself the right questions will help you stay on course and readjust things at the right time. 70% of wealthy families lose their wealth by the second generation, 90% by the third. Why? Well, simply due to a lack of discernment and responsibility. By being here today, you are among the 10% who have decided to break this statistic. By mastering this fourth key, you change your status. You are not just the pilot managing your flight day by day. You become the architect of your job. You understand that every cash flow, every trade you have delegated, every ounce of gold, every currency is a brick in your castle. But a fortress is not meant to lock yourself away and isolate you from the world. It is meant to give you peace of mind. The peace of mind that comes from knowing that whatever happens in the markets, whatever happens in geopolitics, you have set up a system that survives. And even better, a system that will outlive you. That is the greatest gift you can give yourself, the end of your financial anxiety. When you no longer chase after money and instead manage a portfolio that works for you. That is the true definition of what we call sovereignty. And there we have it. We have reached the end of session number 5. And what a journey it has been. What a journey we have accomplished together today. If you take one last look at your dashboard at the end of this day, I hope you no longer just see charts or mysterious symbols. And there we have it. We have reached the end of session 5. And what a journey we have accomplished together. If you take one last look at your dashboard today, I hope you no longer just see charts or mysterious symbols. I hope that now you see a coherent architecture, a living system, one that you have chosen to take control of. Let me recap the 4 pillars of your taking control. First, balance. You now know why your strategy needs both an anchor and a sail. You have understood that gold and Bitcoin are not enemies, but allies that pass the baton to each other. They pass the baton to protect your purchasing power, essentially against monetary devaluation. Next observation. You have learned to take the pulse of the planet, the Nasdaq, the S&P 500, the Forex. These are no longer just background media noise. They are sensors to feed your own weather station. You now know that money is a fluid that seeks growth and security. The third key is mastery. You have tamed that dizzying feeling of altitude. You have accepted that financial success requires a certain emotional coldness. You have learned to focus on your instruments rather than the void, staying true to the flight plan despite the turbulence. The fourth key is sustainability. You have started to build your fortress. You have understood that your wealth must nourish your real life and that the greatest legacy you can leave your children is this piloting software. That's all. A culture of discernment that will in turn set them free. Daniel gives us a challenge at the beginning of each session. He suggests that we step out of victim mode and reclaim our power through education. By being here, by investing this time to strengthen your personal culture, you have already won. You have left the masses who merely hope to join the circle of those who make decisions. Don't let this session become just another video. Make it the starting point of your autonomy. Conduct your audits, check your instruments, and above all, enjoy this newfound peace of mind, knowing that your money is working for you, not the other way around. Technology today offers us unprecedented tools, but it is your discernment that turns them into tools of freedom. Stay curious, stay responsible, and above all, stay in control. Once again, it was a tremendous honor to accompany you during this session. I wish you a magnificent and prosperous ascent toward your goals. And Stefan, I'll let you have the final word to conclude this new episode brilliantly, as you do every time. Thank you all and have a good flight.
Oh my goodness, what can I say? Thank you so much for another phenomenal session, Dominique. And I love your extensive use of analogy and metaphor. Just fantastic. I can't believe how much knowledge, insight and understanding you've shared with us today. But I think your 5th session has to be your best so far. And I, for one, can't wait for number 6. While I figure out how to unpack all of that and talk about my biggest takeaways from today, I just wanted to mention and reiterate a few things that Daniel talked about in his introduction. That has to begin with a huge thank you to each and every one of you. Both XTERA and the code are growing incredibly fast. It's quite breathtaking, and it's wonderful to see so much excitement in our community. Keep up the amazing work and keep sharing XTERA and the code with everyone you know and everyone you meet. They'll be so glad you did when they start seeing their investment growing with such consistency month in, month out. Daniel also mentioned that SEPA payments are now live for our partners in Europe. Plus, we have credit card payments for anyone who may not have a crypto account. The point is to make it as easy as possible for everyone to buy XTERA shares. Thank you once again. We really do appreciate each and every one of you. So I know you're waiting for my biggest takeaway from today. And it has to be the 4 pillars: balance, observation, mastery and sustainability. Firstly, balance. I love the analogy of an anchor and a sail, and the insight that gold and Bitcoin are allies, helping protect your purchasing power against currency devaluation. Secondly, we have observation, and another superb analogy of taking the pulse of the planet. I love to think of the Nasdaq, the S&P 500 and Forex as sensors feeding your very own weather station. Thirdly is mastery. The analogy is high altitude vertigo and how we tame it. It's about maintaining emotional coolness and staying true to your flight plan despite the turbulence. And finally, we have sustainability, designing your fortress. It's about setting yourself free. It's about wealth irrigating real life, and it's about the greatest legacy you can leave your children, setting them free as well. Now, I've said it before, and I'm sure I'll say it again. But I believe we are so lucky to have the XTERA platform to take care of our money. As enthralled as I am when I listen to Dominique and our other educators, I can't imagine ever having the time to match their level of knowledge, skill and expertise. I love listening to them and learning about how it all works. But as I come to understand the incredible level of knowledge, skill and expertise they possess, and the time they've put into building that, it makes me truly appreciate what XTERA does for all of us. Every education session acts as a great reminder to buy more XTERA shares. And that reminds me, you really don't want to miss the next XTERA education session. Mark your calendars right here, right now, because I'm excited to announce that our next education session will take place on Sunday the 17th of May at 4 p.m. UK time. So join us then when we'll be sharing more insights, more information and more expertise. Expertise that's going to take you to the next level. Now, do remember to give Dominique some feedback on today's excellent session. He's already looking forward to hearing your thoughts. If you haven't already done so, pop your comments or any questions you have either in the chat or on Instagram. And that's it for today's call. It only falls to me to thank Daniel for another inspiring introduction and to thank Dominique once again for his phenomenal, thought-provoking and inspiring session. He continues to remind us what makes the real difference between investors who succeed and those who don't. Finally, my thanks to each and every one of you for your time, for your attention, and for your commitment to learning. On behalf of Daniel, Dominique, myself, and the entire team here at XTERA, I wish you continued success and a phenomenal day. We're already looking forward to seeing you on the 17th of May. Bye for now.
Old man, old school, young jam, all black.